So just what's your background? Like, where did you go to school?
I grew up in the middle of California in a very small town called Orosi. It was a little farming community south of Fresno. There were two piano teachers in town, and I got to study piano with one of them when I was 8 years old. And it was love at first sound. From the moment I touched the key, it was an amazing event that I never stopped playing. Then I went on to I studied clarinet and all the woodwind instruments when I went to school, to in grade school and high school, and I pursued music at San Francisco State University in San Francisco, mostly because I just love San Francisco.
Mhm.
And I also love music. It was a huge department at that time. There were two orchestras and, thousands of voice students, thousands of piano students. So I took 2 degrees. I took a degree in music education as an instrumental major and also a piano performance degree. And then I went on and did a master's, and then I became a conductor. And all of my training in the music education field really came in handy when I became a conductor, because I actually already knew how to play all those instruments really badly, but I knew how they functioned.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really great. Now, did you do anything after San Francisco State?
After I got my master's degree, I went straight in and became the assistant conductor to Kent Nagano at the Berkeley Symphony. And now Kent has gone on to have, a big major career all over the world. I'm having a minor career all over the States and partly in China. So I'm really excited. I'm really happy to be able to do what I love doing. And despite the fact that I'm a woman, despite the fact that I'm, a short woman, just bare 5 feet tall, but it just hasn't hindered me yet. And so here I am in Chicago conducting a new opera by a wonderful composer, Kyung-Mi Choi, and it's very difficult. It's all new music. It's very difficult for the voice. It's difficult for the orchestra, but it's an amazingly beautiful score. And the performances will be in 2 weeks. We're going to Tech Week next week. I've been here now 2 weeks.
So I kind of had an order of questions, but what you just brought up made me want to just go. So I'm going to skip around a little bit from what I had planned on. But so you're preparing the score. So I don't think a lot of people, because this will be viewed by musicians and non-musicians alike. And some people don't really understand what a conductor does. Like, what are you doing right now?
What am I doing right now? Right this
Yeah, you
second?
said you're preparing the score. You're learning it. So what? So is the rehearsals portion? Is that the biggest part of conducting?
The biggest part of conducting is in that preparation period before you see anybody. When you learn, you just get yourself with your score and the music, and you absorb as much as you can of what you think the composer is trying to convey. And that
do you do
that's
that?
something studying.
And do you do that through playing the piano and listening, internalizing, or just looking?
Everything, every possible tool and trick, and I use. If there's a recording of something that's already been done, I will go there. If I go to the piano, I stare at the score and just absorb it on my own. I do a lot of minutia detail work when I study. So I'm really looking at this. The violin is piano here, but later the viola is forte 5 bars later, but the violin hasn't moved. Why is that?
Sure.
I do a lot of questioning. I do a lot of, sometimes it's a mistake. Sometimes it's an honest typographical mistake the composer just missed, but sometimes it's intentional. So I do a lot of that kind of minutia study. I look at, and I do a lot of analysis. So where the key structure is going, where the structures of the music happening. This is a big paragraph. This is a chapter. I want to see where the arc of the piece is. And that all comes from my internal studying, which I use any possible tool I can find. If that's going to a singer and says, does this actually singable? Is this, does this seem right to you? Or if it's going to the piano, or if it's going to analysis. So the biggest part of the hardest part of my job to me is that initial score study part. Once I get with people, then it's a matter of implementation. Then I can help people play the best or sing the best they can do with what my understanding of what the composer wants. And I always go back to the composer.
So, but there must be, so you're talking about a new work right now, but there must be, like if you're doing a war horse or a musical that everyone's heard, that it must be a little different because you already know the music and the musicians. So is it more like, I mean, you of course, you have to rehearse even music that you already know,
Right.
but sometimes if it's a piece you're familiar with, maybe you want to highlight it differently or do a different interpretation than you did 10 years ago or something like that.
Exactly. As I was always, it's still, there's still that study period is not quite as detailed because as you say, we all know how it goes, or most of the people know how it goes. Like I'll be doing Traviata in a couple of months at Cinnabar Theater with pocket opera collaboration. So I've done that a couple of times. So I have in my score already written my notes from what I did before, but I would, before I go to my first rehearsal, I will obviously open that up and go, oh, well, I did that 5 years ago. I don't think that's where it's going to be going now. We have a new sensibility. We have different perspectives we bring to it from where we are in our moment. So for me, as a Traviata is a big story about a woman. So I have some agency in that. I can relate to that. Maybe 20 years ago, when I was a young woman, I had a different feeling for what that character was going to react, how that character was going to react, or what the emotion was than I do now. So that helps inform everything. And of course, it's collaboration. So when I get with the artist, then we find it for that person,
Yeah.
or find it with the orchestra.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, just to relate to what you're saying, our family watched West Side Story last night, the new one. And
Oh,
it's so different than the movie from the 1970s and different than the stage version, yet legitimate in its own way, but very current in terms of taking a familiar, probably one of the top 10 musicals in American literature, and so, but they really did it. It was different, but it was pretty interesting. So
I haven't seen it yet. Did you like it?
I did, and Gustav Dudamel did the conducting, and really, really, the score just sounded so good. I mean, it's great. Yeah, so I can recommend it. So, Mary, like, when did you feel like you were a good conductor?
Oh,
Like, the reason I ask that is because I feel like you and I have something in common in that we don't really have an instrument. Like composers and conductors don't have an instrument, right?
mhm.
So I feel like when I got good at composing was about 3 years after college. I took a film scoring program, and we had to write 4 minutes of music for an orchestra every week. So we were just cranking it out, and I felt like I learned good work habits, good preparation, how to stay on track and schedule. I didn't have to write the greatest thing in the world. I just had to get that finished. And in doing so, I really improved, and I felt like I'm a composer now, at least on the craftsman side of it.
Uh-huh.
Craftsmanship. What about you? Do you have something similar or?
I know what you're talking about. There's a point in time where you're still learning, you're still finding things, but then it all comes down to practice, doesn't it? It all comes down to
Yeah,
practice.
but you have to be a good practicer because you can beat your head against the wall and really never reach your goal. You know what I'm saying? Like you
Mhm.
have to practice smart. Yeah, you got to put the time in no matter what. You got to put the time in, but you also there's also something to the how of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the self-evaluation, which is, the desire to make it as good as possible instead of just to make it.
Mm.
Um, I didn't have a point in my career where I said, oh, now I'm a good conductor. It just sort of evolved. The more and more I did it and the more I improved on it. A big part of what helped me, I think, me personally, is doing so much music that has never been heard before, which really required me.
That's good because nobody knows if you're making a mistake.
That's not the point, Peter. No, but that element of how does this go? Nobody knows how it goes except for the composer. And that's what I really enjoy so much. And that's what I enjoy working with you, because we can go back and forth before anybody hears any of the music to find, where it is you want things to land, where you want things to live, where you want things to soar, where you want things to, to let down. That's so exciting. And that's when I got to that point when I could really talk to a composer. I think that's when I really felt like, I'm doing a good job now.
Yeah. Well, I totally support what you're saying, because I feel you are a part of the creative process, and your insights help me and other composers clarify their vision and really what they're up to, and maybe in a way calling us out if something's unclear.
Mhm.
Like, is this, like you say, is this really what you want? And that's invaluable. So you are helping us realize our goals. So, yeah. Okay, so now let's just talk about batons here. Do you have a baton that's this big?
Wow,
I have some I could go fishing with these.
those are giant.
What's that?
Those are giants.
Yes, they are. Let's see.
That for a 1,000-piece orchestra.
And why don't people conduct with two batons?
Oh, that would be very confusing to conduct with two batons.
Yeah, you're right. I would go. I'm just kidding.
Very
Just kidding around. I just want you to see my jar o
okay,
batons.
we're going to go into baton world. So
I got let's see, 5 here. They're basically large and medium. I don't have any small ones like those dinky little ones you sometimes see.
well, it all has to do with the proportion of your body too, right? And
Yeah.
what the weight is. And so these are my custom made batons. Are yours custom made?
No, I got them at the
At Walmart?
Walmart in the music section, the frozen food section, next to the fishing rods.
So these are all the same size. These are my batons. And these fit me, fit my hand, and fit my body. So this works for
How much you paid for that?
this very all-purpose.
How much that cost?
Okay, so this one,
Ooh, nice.
I think this was about $40.
Yeah. Very nice.
And this one is one of my favorites.
With the green wood handle there. Yeah.
And here's another one with the agate.
Beautiful.
This is one of my favorites too. And this is the one that gets used as a basically rehearsal if I'm feeling sort of drab or if I've forgotten the other 3.
And so you decided early on to conduct with a baton and not your hands, because I've seen some orchestral. I've seen a general division of generally vocal conductors, choral conductors conduct with their hands.
Right.
They can mark the breathing a little more carefully, I think. And then orchestral tend to use a baton, as you do. So did you ever make a conscious decision, or how did that turn out?
I went through a little phase once where I wasn't using a baton, but I got so many people that complained we can't see from afar what you're doing with your hands when it was an orchestra. So then I just went back to doing with the baton, because it all has to do with, we want to communicate. So if you're not communicating, do whatever it takes to communicate. Choral conducting is, really a different animal than orchestral conducting. And you're talking about hands. And so that's, choral conducting is less complex, because maybe traditional choral conducting, you have 4 parts, maybe 8. It's very unusual to have more than 8 parts.
And they're almost always right in front of you,
They're
not
all right in front of you, and they're all doing the same thing. They're all vocalizing with their voice. So there's no attack, there's no bow striking, there's no buzzing through the lips. So everyone's doing the same thing. So the hands can really shape that.
right.
So if I'm conducting a course, I will often just use my hands to help them get a blend, or else get them to, give a sharp jab. It's just a different way of producing sound.
Yeah. So again, I'm just kind of jumping around here.
These are good questions.
Weirdest thank you. What's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to you on stage? I just as a comment, I was at a concert once, and it was a new music concert, but it was in the LA Phil. And the conductor had his baton, and as he conducted, he did an upbeat, and the baton flew back into the brass section. That's the funniest thing. And to this day, I don't know if he did it because he was angry because the piece wasn't going well, or if it was truly an accident.
It probably was an accident.
Probably
That's
one.
that's happened to me, but it hasn't gone into the brass section. It usually lands like in the second violin section. And somebody, at a certain point when there's a rest, they'll, lean over and pick it up and then pass it along to the first chair player. And then somehow it gets up to my
Were you on stage or in a pit when that happened?
That happened on stage. Sometimes I actually would carry a second baton if there's a shelf underneath in case that happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll do that. But the weirdest thing that happened to me was I actually fell off the podium.
Oh no.
But I did, it was, it was 10 inches tall. So I just took a step. I was just being very vigorous in my conducting, and I took a step and there was no more podium there. So I just went down and then I just came back up like a jack in the box.
That's funny, man. Not funny. I'm glad you weren't hurt. Because I've fallen off one too, but only for a totally different reason. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So and no like weird musician things happen. Like, I don't know. Everyone broke a string at the same time or something like that.
When I was conducting an opera on Hamlet by Hermann Reuter, who was a German composer who had come from Germany for the US premiere. And we were in the middle of the concert, and there was that section in Hamlet about the mouse trap.
Yeah.
And so we were in the scene about the mouse trap, and a mouse appeared on stage, scurrying between the second and first violins. And I didn't see it because it came from the back, but all of a sudden I was aware as I'm conducting, everybody over here on the violin side was like shifting and making sudden moves. And I'm going, something's going on around there. And then I saw it out of the corner of my eye because it made its way up towards the podium, after the second violin's first, the principal player. The mouse is just sort of scurrying around, and I'm conducting away and I'm going, oh, look at that. There's a mouse on stage, and we're at the mousetrap section. And the woman singing, what was it, her role? The woman in the Hamlet, it'll come to me later. She was this wonderful soprano, small, petite woman, big voice. She saw it out the corner of her eye. She took her heel and just kicked it into the audience.
That's hilarious.
And that took care of the mouse.
Do you think someone like in the orchestra put the mouse there, or do you think it just appeared from the woodwork?
I think it just appeared from the woodwork. It was an old theater. Old theater.
Well, that's a pretty good one. That's a pretty good one, man. A mouse appearing right on cue. I guess you have to pay him now. He's still waiting for his check.
Well, he didn't come out. He didn't
mouse roll. That's funny. So you and I are working on the project called Pilgrim Returns, and as you know, my music, this music in particular, is I like to write compositions based on well-known hymns, and I'm wondering what role hymns have played, if any, have played in your own life. Or is Pilgrim on Earth and Pilgrim Returns the extent of your sort of contact with hymns?
Well, Pilgrim Returns and Pilgrim on Earth is definitely the closest contact I've had with hymns. But I have to say, when I was growing up, my family sent my brother and I to Sunday schools on Sundays. Mm-hmm. Partly was to give us something to do on Sunday morning. The other part was my father had a very small mom and pop grocery store in the small town. Mm-hmm. And so they were working all the time, and we didn't really have babysitters. So whenever there was something that, could be done with us kids, they would try to shove us over there, because otherwise we're sort of running around in the street, happy as a clown. So we went to Sunday school, and through Sunday school, I got to learn hymns. And I loved music. I loved singing. So those were my first exposures to hymns. Later in high school, when I started doing a little bit of composing myself, I'm not a composer, but I just, went through my little phase of creation. And you write poetry, you write stories, you write things, you write music, and I was a musician. So I actually sort of wrote a little arrangement on a hymn, and we got to play it at Easter when I was a sophomore.
In your church.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's neat. That's great. Well, I played a hymn sing last night online, and there were 300 people in attendance. And it just, hymns are such an important part of the service. And it's just a way that people participate when they're in church. It's not just a receiving, it's a inclusive act in which the whole body makes a statement together. So it's a really important thing, and it's one of the few places where public singing is still done. We don't really have public singing, and
I know, I miss
public singing is a way of I mean, in general, even before pandemic, we
right.
the baseball game is the only time people really sing in public, but it does something. It draws people together, and so
Well, karaoke bars.
yeah, good example. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
different purpose, but
But
exactly
it is that communal act. It's just like eating.
yeah. No, I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more. Yeah,
Nourishing is nourishing for the soul, is nourishing for the heart to sing together. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. And that's the beauty about your music, Peter, is that you can take that a hymn that we all have this embraced feeling about, and turn it into something that's, different and magical, but it's still so familiar.
yeah. Yeah, I try to keep that thread of common identification in there so that people don't become lost. Because I could really arrange it in such a way that it
For
becomes
sure.
more intellectual. But so, what's the biggest high you ever had from music or are having from music?
Ooh, the biggest high? One of my biggest highs. One of my biggest highs was actually that Skywalker doing Pilgrim.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is that?
The music was so moving.
Really?
It's so moving. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Um, and part of that, a related high of that was when my mother passed in 2005. I selected pieces from Pilgrim to be played at her service.
Hmm.
And um, and that was, when did we make Pilgrim? Was it
2000.
So it was 5 years later. It's like, time had passed. But when that occasion came up and I heard the recording being played, I mean, it was just as powerful and gripping as that moment in the studio.
That's neat.
Yeah, it was
People
very,
really do love that recording. I'm glad
yeah.
which is why I want to try to do a follow-up to it, but that's cool.
And I'm really looking forward for you to write for timpani for this one.
Yes, I know. For the others out there, Mary's husband is a timpanist and all-around percussionist, but really good timpanist. So Kevin,
But your music really can
totally.
go,
No, I know the punch on the bottom end, the punch yeah.
that
Yeah,
depth of feeling, that depth of power. Yeah.
yeah. So I was going to ask you, yeah, about the size of the orchestra, because you said, so like conducting a larger orchestra is not necessarily a bigger high, because that was a chamber orchestra that we had maybe total of 20 musicians there. We had it. So have you conducted, like a 60-piece orchestra, and does that make a difference to you, or?
It does make a difference. I mean, if nothing else is, just the amount of people that you have to communicate with. And usually when I have conducted the large orchestras, it's always been a traditional repertoire. So it's sort of like everybody knows how it goes in a way. And it's a little bit more, it's a little less direct. what I find is a little less direct because of having, to move everybody in the same general direction. So it's definitely exciting. I like it a lot. I wish I had more opportunity to spend more time with whatever orchestra I'm having instead of, the 2 or 3 rehearsals you get. Usually when you're doing something with a large orchestra, you get maybe 3 rehearsals and then you do the shows. So there's not enough time to really build that strong foundation for what you really want to have happen.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. And just like in terms of how it feels to stand there, do you feel like when you do the gesture that it's actually coming back in the sense that you are actually playing the orchestra, or is it more like, come on guys, like come this way, like you're not quite in control, but you're kind of like directing traffic, you know what I mean?
It's a little bit of both, but it's more the former. It's
For
more
you.
the former. Yeah, for me, if I'm conducting an orchestra, I'm really feeling where every line is placed and every part is. I really hear that. I really want that.
Can you enjoy it though? Because I found in my limited conducting experience that I'm so focused on reaching the cues and thinking ahead, like I'm on this bar, but I know in a bar and a half, I got to cue the bass, that I'm not really taking in the whole, I'm not a listener in the same sense that the guy in the back of the room is just like, oh yeah, I can hear it all. And he gets to wash over him. You can't submit to the moment completely because
Well, that's true. That's true. You cannot submit to the moment completely, but you can do as much as possible to make it happen. And so just the other day in my orchestra rehearsal here in Chicago, there was this incredibly gorgeous moment happening between the flute and the harp and the cello. And I think there was a tam-tam, the percussion was going, and then there's a gentle ostinato in the violin.
So a couple of layers going on at the same time.
A lot of layers going on at the same time, but it was basically driven by a beautiful cello solo with some counterpoint from the flute. But
the primary line was in the cello with a couple of other.
Yeah, but that actually I could really enjoy it at the same time as leading it, because I could feel we were all doing it together. They were not playing that particular way because I said to do that. They felt it the same way I felt it as a result of having rehearsals together to help convey to them how I feel it. And they understood how I felt it. And then they were able to, we were all inviting each other to feel it the same way.
Yeah.
It was an amazing feeling. And it was actually in front of the singers. It was at the Sitzprobe rehearsal where the singers for the first time meet the orchestra and the orchestra meets the singers for the first time. And I let us play a little bit, 2 minutes into this orchestral interlude, because I could feel them going with me. And I said, oh, we need to do this, even though there's no singing. We're supposed to be rehearsing for the singers, but I wanted to keep going with this. I got to the end of the section and and I stopped conducting and there was absolute silence. I looked around the room and I said, did you guys get the same goosebumps that I did? And everyone just burst out into applause. We all felt it at the same time.
That's so cool. Yeah. Well, that's a great, I think we'll end there because that just described a really musical high that you've had just in the last couple of days.
Yeah.
So thank you, Mary. This will go out to the world and be part of.
I'm looking forward to getting scores.
You'll get them soon enough.